BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. Alright, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. This episode is going to be done a little bit differently, and I do have some announcements to start with. However, before we begin, I would just like to say that today is August 9th, and this is an anniversary memorial tribute to the victims of the Tate-LaBianca murders that took place back in 1969. Yes, I will discuss some alternative theories that people have about the cases. However, firstly, I would like to say a big rest in peace to the victims that were killed in those crimes: Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, Stephen Parent, Lino LaBianca, Rosemary LaBianca. And I was watching the documentary yesterday, Jay Sebring, Cutting to the Truth. I had been meaning to get around to that for a while. Some people had even requested a response to it in the comment section down below, and they really re-emphasized that there is a certain focus on only some of the people that are involved with the Manson family, as well as some of the people who are involved on the victim side. And one of the reasons why this documentary was made, Cutting to the Truth, was Jay Sebring's nephew wanted to make the film because so many news articles and pieces of news reporting and coverage simply referred to the victims as Sharon Tate and 4 others. And he's like, my uncle is just referred to as one of the other victims. And even I am guilty of this. Last year when I did an anniversary/memorial, I called it The Murder of Sharon Tate, partially because of a book that had been written by Lawrence Schiller, but that's the whole point. Everybody is zoning in on Sharon Tate because she was perhaps the most famous victim of the Tate-LaBianca murders, and when they say the Tate-LaBianca murders, there were 5 people who were killed on the first night, and then Lino and Rosemary LaBianca on the second night, at the direction of whom? Was it Charles Manson? Was it Tex Watson? Was it the Zodiac Killer? We'll see throughout the explorations of this recording. However, this film, Cutting to the Truth, also said a rest in peace to Gary Hinman and Shorty Shea, who were 2 other victims of the Manson family. And the final card in the movie says, and to all other victims of violent crime. So that's what we have to do. We have to say rest in peace, and we have to honor the victims in some ways. And remember that they were real people that lost their lives, and no matter what happened, they didn't deserve to have their lives ended like that, and an absolutely horrific and vicious crime. And some people, to this day, even say that the Tate-LaBianca murders were the biggest crimes of the 20th century, or the largest impact. It had the largest impact on Western civilization in the 20th century. And then, of course, in the 21st century, it would be a different ball game. Most people refer to the O.J. Simpson trial as the trial of the century, but when you look at the actual crimes themselves, I mean, in the United States of America, it's somewhat of a defendable case. And one more time, the name of the documentary is Jay Sebring, Cutting to the Truth. It's available here on YouTube for free on the YouTube Movies channel. I started watching a lot more of the YouTube Movies channel recently. I mean, it's free and it's so easily available. But they also covered some ground in that about how should Charles Manson be portrayed in the media. And I said very clearly this year that I wrote a book called Killer on a White Horse, which is a novel, a murder mystery. And yes, it's inspired by the events of both the Zodiac Killer and the Manson family, the Zodiac-Manson connection, if you will, and I'll say some things about that at the end of the episode, later on, about how we portray people like Manson, as well as any other criminal, whether it's some unknown figure like the Zodiac Killer, or some of the people that we do know, like not only Manson, but also his followers, whether it's Tex Watson or Susan Atkins, and so on. But there are some other announcements that I would like to share with you guys, and the first is that I did a live stream on the Professor Dad channel, along with Thomas Henry Horan, who is the host, as well as with Drew Beeson, and it was called Riverside PD, Bates Had to Die Letter Was a Hoax. That happened last Saturday. One more time, it is on the Professor Dad channel. Riverside PD, Bates Had to Die Letter Was a Hoax. It was really good to talk to Drew and Professor Horan just about the Zodiac Killer, about Sherry Jo Bates, as well as every other subject under the sun. Now, in the future, it's possible that other people will be joining us for live streams like that, such as Evan from Texas, as well as Manny Grossman has also expressed interest. And part of the reason is because Thomas Henry Horan and Manny Grossman seem to have somewhat of a dispute and or disagreement going on. During the live stream, Thomas Horan said that Manny Grossman, who is the guy who does those walking tours of the Son of Sam sites, and this is relevant to today's episode, the guy who does the walking tours of the Son of Sam sites and like showing the route the killer would have taken, how were the victims moving, and just getting very familiar areas, getting you familiar with the areas of New York where the Son of Sam slayings took place. He said that Manny Grossman was a guy who was using a lot of his material, borrowing from Thomas Henry Horan without citing where the material came from, or almost regurgitating points from Thomas Horan's show, the Stones Unturned podcast, in his videos. And Manny Grossman did respond in the comments section saying that he can accept disagreement, but he did not accept being called a plagiarist because he's only watched like a little bit of Thomas Horan's channel, and I would side with Manny on that one. I haven't seen all of his videos, but from what I have seen from his channel, I cannot say that he was plagiarizing the Stones Unturned podcast, and I hope those guys can smooth the waters and that there will be a future live stream with all of us, because Manny Grossman and Thomas Horan are really on common ground with exploring the ultimate evil by Maury Terry. This is how this stuff gets relevant to the Zodiac Killer, because first, Maury Terry was a believer that there is a link between the Son of Sam slayings in New York and the Manson family in California, even though the Manson family activity is taking place much earlier, years before the Son of Sam slayings. Then Thomas Henry Horan adds an additional layer to that. It's not just the Son of Sam and the Manson family, it's also the Zodiac Killer. He says there is this link among the three of them, and Maury Terry would go on to say that there is this underground serial killer cult called the Children. Maybe serial killer cult isn't the best way to say it. The shadow network of cult-like activity. I often use that term, and I would like to talk about that in just a second, but I would always want to remind you guys that you can download this show for free at LaunchPad 1. There's a link to that in the description box, as well as to the Amazon page for the book Killer on a White Horse by me, Ed DeHaan. And when you download the audio, it is a pure podcast. You can take the audio of it in podcast form, take it on the go anywhere and anyhow, and then it's a good way to follow along with these episodes. There will also be a special first cut of this episode that will only be available on LaunchPad 1. But let's look at some of these claims about this type of Zodiac-Manson connection. And one more thing, though, there will be a type of difference with the book title. The Zodiac-Manson connection was a book by Howard Davis. The Manson-Zodiac connection, the title of this episode, was something that was put out on the Zodiac Killer channel. It was one of the title cards that they featured, with a Zodiac suspect, Bruce Davis, who was one of Charles Manson's right-hand men. But with Thomas Henry Horan's theory about how there's this link among the Son of Sam, the Manson family, and the Zodiac Killer, recently on the Stones Unturned podcast, he's been talking about how you have the global elites, you have the oligarchs. Some people refer to them as the New World Order. The LaRouche movement called them the British system of political economy, based on a monetary system filled with speculation. People have lots of different names for these individuals, the elites, the oligarchs. How do they function? And some people think that these oligarchs want to destroy humanity because it makes them easier to control. They want to do anything to preserve their power. Oligarch, a concentration of wealth and a concentration of power for the few. In the early episodes of the Stones Unturned podcast, in the new season, have been trying to promote the idea that this has been going on for centuries, and in the 1960s, it was very, very easy for them to use the media to manipulate how people are thinking. We have television, radio, movies, music. All of these things are going in overdrive in the 1960s, let alone space travel. People are going to the moon. Lots of things are changing in the 1960s, and the media coverage surrounding the Zodiac killer, the Manson family, and the son of Sam was and could have been manipulated to alter the perception of modern culture. In the documentary on Jay Sebring, Cutting to the Truth, they even talk about how the 60s ended on August 9th, 1969. Now, why would they say that? Because that was the night when the Tate-LaBianca murders concluded. And I really noticed countless media sources say that the 60s ended with the Tate-LaBianca murders. So maybe there is some truth to that the media is portraying this image of sex, drugs, and rock and roll is a bad thing. And they even said some things about this in Cutting to the Truth. They were like, oh, if you sit around and you smoke marijuana, well, oh, am I going to turn into Charles Manson? So it's dissuading people away from anything to do with this image that could be somewhat tied to the hippies, because the hippie movement was very, very big in the 1960s. It was growing, and it was controlling how people could think. It was influencing how people could think, and this could have been one of the ways to throw water on that fire that was brewing. But I think there's an additional element to this Zodiac Manson, son of Sam connection, and that relates to more of the shadow network of cult-like activity. Thomas Horn talks a lot about it. Maury Terry was all about it. And countless other conspiracy theorists believe that this is happening, that there are occult practices that are going on in the elite circles, and sometimes they spill over into the general public. Like the elites have their own belief systems, the oligarchs have their own belief systems, and sometimes the rituals that they produce get out of control, people end up dying, and then their activities become well known to the general public, and then they need a patsy or a boogeyman to blame, or somebody who's just going to be the face of these destructive tendencies, whether they're doing things like thrill kills, or they're doing things like murdering people because of the drug trade. They're just going to blame it on somebody else. So that is another alternative theory. In short, the elites are trying to destroy humanity because they want to preserve power for themselves, whether it's financially, economically, or it's psychologically and affecting culture in certain ways. All right, so that's some of the more broader things that you can hear about on The Stones Unturned. I'm very fascinated with it. I'm not the biggest diehard believer in that. But if this episode is called The Manson Zodiac Connection, there's another segment that I would like to do right now, and that is, was Charles Manson the mastermind of the Zodiac murders that took place in 1968 and 69? Because as I understand it, Howard Davis, author of the Zodiac Manson Connection, has a twofold theory. First, he believes that Bruce Davis was the Zodiac killer, and secondarily, he has also accused Charles Manson of being the mastermind of the Zodiac crimes in 68 and 69, beginning with the Lake Herman Road murders on December 20th of 68 and culminating with the Zodiac murders, or the Zodiac's murder of Paul Stein on October 11th, 1969. There was a book that came out many years ago, about 9 or 10 years ago. I just went through this big phase when I was watching lots of interviews with Charles Manson, and I really wanted to go back and find that old interclip because it was written by someone who was one of his cellmates at one time, and he wanted to write an expose on Charles Manson. The best I could do was pull up the name Philip Phillips, who had written something called The Manson Myth, and I'm not exactly sure if that's the right one. I couldn't find the exact interclip. That's an interview clip of Charles Manson and this guy, but they did a three-way interview, and Charles Manson's kind of just like walking around in circles at the time, and you may have seen it because it's the time that Charles Manson says, "Nothing wrong with being incompetent," there's nothing you gotta worry about. But the thesis of the book was that Charles Manson was not a mastermind of anything. They flat out asked the guy, well, why did you write this book? And you could just see his expression turn to, well, because I wanted to make money. And you could see that going on behind his eyes. I'm not a psychic or anything, but he just went really blank. Like, why did you write a book about Charles Manson? And I mean, I'm sure in all honest terms, he did want to give his own personal take on this very famous individual. But he's like, well, a pile of money fell in my lap and I wanted to keep it. Yeah, I definitely think there was something to do with that for profit. But also, he said in response was the thesis of the book was to say that Charles Manson was too incompetent to be the mastermind of anything. However, it was none other than Stephanie Harlow who wrote into this channel, Black Box Online Radio, when she shared a lot of things about Manson, saying Manson's personality really changed later on in life. Like prior to 1969, or at least prior to 1970, his personality was very different, and he his brain was heavily affected by heavy drug use, which he experienced in prison. But in response to saying that Charles Manson was too incompetent to be the mastermind of any criminal operation, Manson said the famous line, "Nothing wrong with being incompetent, there's less you gotta worry about." So, not only are people uncertain as to whether or not Charles Manson committed the Zodiac crimes, or that he orchestrated the Zodiac crimes and he directed Bruce Davis to be the Zodiac killer. Also, people aren't even certain that Charles Manson was the mastermind of the Tate-LaBianca murders. And Brian Davis is the host of the Tate-LaBianca radio program, and I was going to go through many of his episodes and then do a big expose comparing Brian Davis's comments to Thomas Horan's comments, because they agree on something very, very important. That's not going to happen because I found an episode where Brian Davis actually beat me to it, and he absolutely despises the Stones Unturned podcast and Thomas Henry Horan. But there was this episode when they're just going through all of the same things. They meet in the middle. They have absolutely different theories, but there's one point that they do share in. That is that they believe that Charles Manson was not the mastermind of the Tate-LaBianca murders, and ergo not the mastermind of the Zodiac killer murders either. But the reason why is they believe that Tex Watson was the person who was actually calling the shots, and it can be down to certain lines of dialogue, such as Charlie tells the girls to get in the car and do whatever Tex tells you to do. That means that Charles Manson is in charge of the women, but Tex Watson is calling the shots, and he's just telling the girls to go with Tex Watson. And Tex Watson is responsible for the Tate-LaBianca murders. He has bigger connections to the drug trade, bigger connections to the Church of Scientology. Tex Watson absolutely dismissed all of this in his book, Will You Die For Me, saying, yeah, he had connections to the Church of Scientology. He went to a meeting at somebody's house and he almost fell asleep in it. I mean, he indirectly dismissed all of those allegations. But Brian Davis was also on the same page about Tex Watson is much more influential in both the Tate murders and the LaBianca murders, particularly the LaBianca murders, thinking that that was not something that was ordered by Charles Manson. Instead, that was something that Tex Watson did to cover up all the damage that he had done the night before. And in short, Tex Watson was also fried from drugs. Like, he had a horrible trip on belladonna where he lost awareness of his mental faculties and his personality became more outrageous, so the legend says, and that he's actually the guiding force in both the Tate murders and the LaBianca murders, killing those 7 people. And that Charles Manson is somewhat telling the truth, because that's another point. Charles Manson always admits that he did things, like he says he cut off Gary Hinman's ear. He says that he was stealing things. He admits to burglary, but he doesn't admit to having any role with the Tate-LaBianca murders. Instead, like he was saying, I didn't tell people to do anything other than what they wanted to do. Now you could be like, okay, well, he was still up for parole for many years, but yeah, okay, he's going to lie. But there is a consistency of truth-telling with Charles Manson, and Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, did point out that bad people tend to tell the truth a lot. We think that bad people are going to be liars like Manson or the Zodiac Killer. Cole's comments were directed toward the Zodiac Killer. But there could be something about that Charles Manson simply just told the girls whom were his followers to go with Tex Watson, who had connections to other people, because Tex didn't come out of anywhere. No, he didn't come out of nowhere. He had a life before that. But in addition to talking about Charles Manson as the mastermind of the Zodiac crimes, or the mastermind of anything, I mean, it's becoming less and less likely, but Charles Manson was also not only a born psychopath. I talked about this in the episode The Neuroscience of Serial Killers when I interviewed a neuroscientist about this stuff, and the example that she first brought up was Charles Manson's neurotransmitters were simply functioning backwards. He was a born psychopath. Society didn't do it to him. He had a very rough upbringing. He had an abusive uncle, but he was indeed a psychopath. And Charles Manson was also diagnosed as a schizophrenic in 1963. I would cite Brian Davis for that one as well. Moving on to somebody else named Davis, I was listening to 2 interviews with Howard Davis, author of the Zodiac Manson Connection, on Planet X Filmworks and the Tate-LaBianca radio program, and Howard Davis has that twofold theory right. The first is that Bruce Davis was the Zodiac killer, and the second is that Charles Manson orchestrated the Zodiac murders in 68 and 69. Okay, let's look at some of that stuff. The first one is, this is going to sound, well, let's just say this is going to sound warm and welcoming. Howard Davis once wrote into one of my episodes, The Zodiac Manson Conspiracy, and said that he was willing to do an interview with me, and he'd be willing to talk to me about the Zodiac Manson connection. And I said, all right, let's do it. Welcome with open arms. Let's do it anytime you want. And I never heard back. I even went to his website and I sent him an email, but the email got sent back and said it could not be delivered. Well, I would still like to put that out there. Howard Davis, if you're listening to this, then you're always welcome to talk to me about the Zodiac Manson connections, set the record straight, or present your side of the story directly. Gladly. Bill Nelson also has a book out on the subject of a link between the Zodiac murders and the Manson family activity. But let's look at Bruce Davis as a Zodiac suspect. When I was listening to the Tate-LaBianca radio program, Howard Davis was once featured as a guest, and not only did he accuse Bruce Davis of being the Zodiac killer, he said that Bruce Davis was living in Riverside, California in 1966 when he was working as a pipe fitter. Now this is interesting because if you go to one of my episodes, Bruce Davis Theories, on this channel, meaning Bruce Davis directly responded to that allegation. You can see where this is going. Riverside, California, 1966, that he was the murderer of Sherry Jo Bates. It's not only that Bruce Davis is the Zodiac killer, but also that he committed the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966. Bruce Davis directly challenged that by saying that he has never lived in Riverside, California, and he has never worked as a pipe fitter. I thought that was really interesting, and it's an older interview with Howard Davis. But I'm bringing this up because some guy named Caleb wrote a letter to Bruce Davis in prison, laying out the case that people have been making about how he's the Zodiac killer, and Bruce Davis wrote some notations in response to that, and I talk about this a lot in the episode Zodiac Killer Bruce Davis Theories, available on this channel. There's an older black box recording that is simply called Zodiac Killer Bruce Davis. Bruce McGregor Davis, not Bruce McGuire Davis. But to be honest, that's not very good. I think the one that's better is called Zodiac Killer Bruce Davis Theories. And I mean, like, to his credit, I mean, I know he's in jail for the rest of his life and most likely will not get out, but he did directly respond to these allegations of being the Zodiac killer. I guess that's not fair. He indirectly responded to them, firstly, by pointing out the inaccuracies in what people are saying about him, like he's never lived in Riverside, he was never a pipe fitter, he wasn't present during the time of the Sherry Jo Bates murder, and so on. But Howard Davis would cling to one thing. I know what Howard would say in response to that. When Bruce Davis was directly asked about being the Zodiac killer, in terms of a direct question, not where are you living, not what were you doing, were you the Zodiac killer, his response was, I've never been charged with those crimes, so I have no comment on them. Alright, so I will give you that one, Howard. And also, here's one point where I think Howard Davis was correct about his Zodiac killer suspect, Bruce Davis. he said that Bruce Davis was the smartest member of the Manson family, and I agree with that. I think that's a good observation, because even when you listen to things like Bruce Davis doing his interview on the BBC, he is someone who is downplaying his intelligence. He is pretending not to know things that he should know. Scientology, what's that? Is that like them processed church people, like turning on his East Tennessee charm, so to speak? And yes, Bruce Davis does have a hard East Tennessee accent, but he was pretending to not be aware of things that he should definitely have been aware of, and I can accept that Bruce Davis is the most intelligent member of the Manson family, and he is just not trying to share it all at once, or being a little bit deceptive about it. Charles Manson famously had 3 right-hand men. The first is Tex Watson, whom we already discussed. The second is Bruce Davis, and the third is Paul Watkins, in no particular order. If anything, it seems that Tex Watson became a right-hand man of Charles Manson later on in his Manson family saga, prior to the Tate-LaBianca murders, but Bruce Davis was someone who wasn't trying to seek the fame the way that Paul Watkins was. Paul Watkins would go on to write a book called My Life with Charles Manson, and then he would provide Vincent Bugliosi with a bunch of things about Manson. One point that I did hear on the Tate-LaBianca radio program was that when you hear the story of Charles Manson taking LSD with his Manson family members, and Manson would always take a smaller dose, like that's been repeated in everything, Helter Skelter. Even if you watch the movie version of Helter Skelter, you'll see Charles Manson taking LSD, but either not doing it or taking a smaller dose, so that he isn't aware of his mind, but other people are not. On the Tate-LaBianca radio program, Brian Davis brought up something about how that wasn't even Manson, that was Paul Watkins who did that. And then later on, throughout the garbage disposal known as the media, we now think that it was Charles Manson. I mean, you're listening to like a 3-hour radio program. Is that like you're not really getting like the source notations and so on, but is that really what happened? It's possible. It's possible. I can share that much. Now, I think it was Classic Chevy Cat who wrote in the comments section about why do people have such a fascination with Charles Manson and the Tate-LaBianca murders? Because we know who did it. Well, I mean, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, we know who committed the crimes. The big question that people try to explore is why? What was the motivation for the Tate-LaBianca murders? And Mark Hewitt has a new book. He has a book that's being re-released. His Manson book is going to be re-released soon, and I would invite you to check out his stuff, Genius Publishing. He's also the author of the Hunted trilogy. But I asked Mark Hewitt about this because he had a book on Manson. What was the motivation for the Tate-LaBianca murders? And he said that he supported the conventional one, that Manson wanted to get revenge on the media establishment, the establishment period, and that's the best way I think you can say is that the motive for the LaBianca murders was in the conventional sense. Charles Manson did say very clearly that the people were sent to the house. This is in the Ronald Reagan Jr. interview, that people were sent to the house where Sharon Tate lived because Terry Melcher broke a contract. Terry Melcher was his record producer, supposed to get Charles Manson into the music business, and that it was about getting revenge on that. Someone was not going to realize their lifelong dream. It's not going to happen, so he was done in an act of revenge. It was not even so much about driving fear into the heart of Terry Melcher, but driving fear into the heart of the media elites, because they knew that that house represented something to the media elites. And as we've said very clearly, Sharon Tate was murdered. Jay Sebring was murdered, the hairstylist to the stars. Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folgers coffee fortune. And I don't think it was that calculated, but that was the idea. That was the overall blueprint. Drive fear into the media establishment. And then Charles Manson also said in a different interview that was featured in the documentary Cease to Exist that Leno and Rosemary LaBianca had to die because they were in possession of a black phone book that had the numbers of all the names and phone numbers of people in the music business. So I think you can see where that is going. And a lot of people try to expand upon this. They think it's a drug deal gone wrong. They think that it was a prostitution deal gone wrong. It was a party that got out of control and somebody got double crossed. In the documentary, the Jay Sebring one that's available on YouTube Movies, they did point out, though, that Jay Sebring had an enormous amount of financial trouble. Roman Polanski even says that they had the same dentist, and Jay Sebring owed his dentist $5,400. So it's like, well, I mean, one way to solve that would be drug money. I mean, if you're in an extreme amount of debt and you know somebody like Wojtek Frykowski who could have connections to the drug trade using Tex Watson, I see where people are going with that, but I am not convinced. So a lot of people just maybe can't accept that the conventional explanation for something is all there is. They're just, well, it goes back to the psychology of conspiracy theories, the inability to admit that bad things happen. Why are people so fascinated with the Tate-LaBianca murders? They can't accept that this tragedy took place because of the arrogance and selfishness and schizophrenic psychopathic ramblings of Charles Manson didn't make it onto the music airwaves. Okay, I mean, it's not a satisfying answer, but maybe that is what indeed happened. And as you can tell, I do support the conventional narrative. I'm totally open to other possibilities. One point that I will absolutely reject is from the Stones Unturned podcast, when Thomas Henry Horn said that the reason why no one can find a motive for the Tate-LaBianca murders is because those people didn't commit the crimes. They were instead brainwashed by MKUltra and all given false memories. I don't think so. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'll eat my hat, but I wouldn't bet my life on that one. That, I think, is just a little bit too extreme. And as far as Charles Manson being a mastermind, even though I saw an interview with Manson about 10 years ago with some guy whose name might be Philip Phillips, or maybe it's not. I don't even remember the guy's name. I don't remember the title of his book. But still, based on all the other observations I've made about Charles Manson, I do not think that he orchestrated the Zodiac killer crimes in 1968 and 69. Why? It's that reason. He's incompetent. That is what I do agree with. Charles Manson is much more incompetent than people would give him credit for. Here's one final point. I forget if this was on Planet X Filmarks or on the Tate-LaBianca program, but the Zodiac killer authored a letter in 1974, the Exorcist letter. But you might be thinking something about Bruce Davis. Well, he was sentenced to life in prison. Okay, sentenced to death, but then the sentence is commuted to life in 1972, and then everybody just stayed in prison, right? Life with the possibility of parole. Well, Bruce Davis is in jail in 1974. Now, Howard Davis can correct me if I'm wrong, but he accuses Bruce Davis of writing the Exorcist letter in prison. I mean, I think they monitor some communications. I think that they are somewhat aware of things that are going in and out. P.S. If I don't see this note in your paper, I will do something nasty, which you know I am capable of. And even if you're going to be like, okay, well, it doesn't say this is the Zodiac speaking on it. Yeah, but then the police became aware of it, and I mean, all of the ways in which that would have blown up, or the amount of paper trail that would have been left behind, I do not believe that Bruce Davis wrote the 1974 Exorcist letter in prison. I also do not believe that he was living in Riverside, California in 1966. So I would just like to leave it at that. I'm not a believer in the Zodiac Manson connection, and as you see here, the Manson Zodiac connection, as I said, also from the Zodiac Killer channel. There's an episode on Bruce Davis over there if you'd like to hear more. But the last thing I would say is, I did write a book this year, but I wrote it last year, actually published it this year, called Killer on a White Horse, which talks about characters that are very similar to the Zodiac Killer and Charles Manson. And that was the source inspiration, not based on a true story, but maybe inspired by true events. And they talked about this in the documentary, the J. Sebring one on YouTube, that is this a moral or ethical thing to do? They said, okay, people make money off of Charles Manson, like especially people who are wearing T-shirts with his face on them, and then you also have people who use what they call Charles Manson rip-offs. Now, is that moral or ethical? Just as someone who has done this firsthand, I don't have any character in my book named Charles Manson. Absolutely not. There is no Charles Manson in the story. And also, the character that does have a resemblance to him is portrayed in a negative light. And I think almost all of these, whether it's the Helter Skelter movie or the movie Charlie Says, or some of those other ones out there like Manson, which you can also see online for free, they portray Charles Manson very negatively. So yes, they're telling the story, but they're not glorifying it, they're not romanticizing it, and they're not doing anything to be like, oh, look at this cool smooth talker. No, instead, they're trying to recreate something that actually happened. And then there are going to be things that are dramatizations or even fictionalized narratives like I created in Killer on a White Horse. But it also has genuine original creations, imagination, and differences. I mean, there are creative liberties that people are allowed to use and to express things. But here's another point on that. J.R.R. Tolkien didn't invent dragons and wizards and elves and so on. J.K. Rowling didn't invent wizards either. They borrowed from other ideas, or they have these pre-existing ideas that they look toward, and concepts and characters. They're all coming from some things. People don't just create things out of pure thin air. There are experiences and understandings and other sources of true stories and other sources of fictional stories that they use to build their knowledge pool. So I don't really think it's very unethical to have a character based on Charles Manson. I think it would only be unethical or immoral if you were to make a movie about Charles Manson purely to make him look cool. And some people sell T-shirts to make Charles Manson look cool, and they brought up lots of examples in that Sebring documentary. But what do you think about any of this? And I would love to hear a bigger challenge question to you guys. Do you think Charles Manson was the architect of the Zodiac crimes? Why or why not? And so I think that's where we're going to conclude things for now. One more time, rest in peace to Sharon Tate, J. Sebring, Wojtek Frykowski, Abigail Folger, Stephen Parent, Lino LaBianca, Rosemary LaBianca, Shorty Shea, Gary Hinman, and all other victims of violent crime. I'll see you guys on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.